All right, everybody, welcome to BO Boys for Tuesday, January 3rd. Fuck it, it's a raw feed. We're doing it live. I'm Clayton.
Yeah, I'm Pat and Clayton. It's happening again.
Oh,
It
yeah.
it's happening. Avatar 2 is doing what Avatar do. And why don't you tell everyone just how Avatar, The Way of Water, and the other movies did this past weekend? So I guess this would have been the weekend of Friday, December 30th,
Mm-hmm.
2022. Is that where we're at? Yeah,
20.
that's the
Yep.
weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Number one, Avatar The Way of Water made $67.4 million. That's a plus 6% from last weekend. It is currently standing at $425.5 million in its third frame. Number two, Puss in Boots: The Last Wish made $16.8 million, up 35%. It added 22 theaters and it's at $61.2 million in its second weekend. Number three, Black Panther: Wakanda Forever made $5.1 million, up 47%. It added 60 theaters. It's at $438.2 million in its eighth frame. Number four, Whitney Houston: I Want to Dance with Somebody made $3.9 million, down 16%. No theater change. It's at $14.5 million in its second weekend. And number five, Babylon made $2.6 million, down 28%. It added eight theaters. It's at $10 million in its second frame. And that is your top five.
All right, Clayton. So the big takeaway here, let's start at the top. Avatar: The Way of Water. So it did, would you say, $67 million for
Mm-hmm.
the 3-day weekend?
Yes.
It did on Monday, on its Monday, January 2nd, which is sort of the last holiday of this holiday period. It's Tuesday, people are going back to work, the drudgery begins. But Avatar: Way of Water on the Monday did $21.4 million, one of the biggest Mondays of all time, in a third Monday,
Yeah.
one of the biggest third Mondays ever. It's up there with, the tippy top, your Avatar ones, your Force Awakens, those type of movies. And what's incredible here is, Clayton, the third weekend of Avatar: The Way of Water did 6% better than the second 3-day weekend.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not talking about a hold. We're talking about an
Yeah.
increase in a third weekend. Is it safe to say that not just we told you so, but Big Jim Cameron told you so, and it is so? The Way of Water is a phenomenon. It is doing everything that anyone could have possibly hoped it would do at the box office.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, and I agree with that he has done it again. I don't know if this movie's going to do as well as the first one, all in, right?
Sure,
Which is like the biggest film of all time internationally. I mean,
sure.
it's probably not going to happen. But the people who said that this was going to fail, it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't going to make that $2 billion, which Jim Cameron put out there and set as a yard marker. The fact that they said that's not going to happen, I mean, it looks like it could happen,
Yes, yes.
right? I mean, it could happen, it could not happen, but it also is closer to happening than not happening.
And it
People
never
wanted this
needed to
movie to fail.
happen.
He doesn't need, exactly. It doesn't need to be
2.9
that.
million. This movie didn't need to be the biggest movie of all time to be a success. I mean, it did have to be for crazy people or for
Mm-hmm.
people who were declaring it a failure before it ever came out, because there's no Spider-Man in it, and there's
Yeah.
zero Spider-Man as opposed to 3 Spider-Man in it. So like that group, they were always going to say this was a failure if it didn't make $3 billion. But in the real world, where the BO boys and all the wanna BO boys, wanna BO girls, wanna BO people
People.
reside, this movie is on its way to being a huge success, even if it doesn't get near the 2.9 billion that the first movie made.
Yeah. So, I mean, all the people who came out of the woodwork before this movie came out, and then when it
Mm-hmm.
had a smaller opening than expected, you
Mm-hmm.
know where they are this New Year's? They're back in that woodwork.
Yep.
right? So
Yep.
if you want to find them, you can just knock, knock, knock
Yep.
on the
Yep.
woodwork, and they ain't gonna answer.
No, they're going to be in there eating stale leftovers. I mean, we're talking here. It's Tuesday, January 3rd, and those Avatar naysayers are in the woodwork eating food that was cooked fish from December 24th. They're in the woodwork clinging to that fish because they don't want to go to the supermarket. They don't want to go to restaurants. They don't want to show their faces. So they are eating old holiday fish from 2 weeks ago because
Yeah.
of what Avatar Way of Water is doing at the box office right now.
Yeah, and I mean, listen, this is best case scenario for
Yep.
what we thought could happen,
Mm-hmm.
and we're not in the bag for Jim Cameron, huh?
No.
We're
Huh?
not in the bag for Disney, huh?
Huh?
We just know that when a movie like this succeeds at this level, it is better for theaters. It's
Mm-hmm.
better for what we want, which is more PLFs. What
Yes.
this movie is proving is that it's having to leave money on the table. Because
Mm-hmm.
when you look at the showings for the IMAXs and the 40Xs and all those premium, the Dolbys, all those
Yep.
premium screens, you're seeing them full. And then you look at the 2D showings and you're seeing sparse people everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
Mm-hmm.
because this is a movie that's an event and needs to be seen in a certain capacity that's not being supported by the theaters at the moment.
Yep.
So
Yep.
this is an instructive movie as well, because if you think this movie was doing well now, imagine if there was double the IMAXs.
Yes. Yes. Then you
Now
would have
that would have been a
had.
more maybe front loaded,
Yep.
but then you would have been looking at a Bafa Bobo.
Right. That's a world in which an Avatar Way of Water could do Marvel opening weekend numbers. If there
Mm-hmm.
were enough PLFs and specifically enough IMAXs to satisfy all of those customers, because people were waiting to see this for at least the first time in IMAX. So they
Yeah.
waited until the middle of the first week or the second week, or as we saw, the third Monday,
Mm-hmm.
which Avatar Way of Water's third Monday, Monday, January 2nd, is the 22nd biggest Monday of all time, which, and you might say 22nd, that's far down the list, but that's of all Mondays in the history of box office. And we're talking about Way of Water's third Monday.
Yes. Yes.
You know,
Absolutely.
its third Monday is up there with the first Monday of The Lion King, or the first Monday of Shrek 2, or the first Monday of The Dark Knight. Those are first Mondays. Clayton, we're talking about third Monday with
Yeah.
Way of Water, and it's one of the biggest Mondays of all time. And that
And
is why we waited until Tuesday right now to do this episode, because we knew the Monday would be such an important part of this story.
yeah, we knew there'd be a big Monday. We needed to report on the big Monday. And
Yeah.
now it is pulling ahead of Rogue One, correct?
Yes. Yes. It's
Okay.
pacing ahead of Rogue One now. And that was the movie that everyone said, okay, it looks like Avatar is going to do Rogue One numbers domestically.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we are in a world now where it's pretty safe to bet Avatar, The Way of Water is going to have a bigger domestic haul than Rogue One. You know, Rogue One in 2016 topped out at $533 million domestic. Avatar: The Way of Water is at $425 million domestic in its third weekend. It's going to blow past Rogue One when all is said and done. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
Avatar: Way of Water now, 67 million its third weekend. It's at 425. I do think that 600 million domestic feels, not like a slam doink, but I
Mm-hmm.
think I would bet on that. And I think we're in the territory where, I wouldn't want to bet on it right now, but I think next week we may start to be talking about, is Avatar: Way of Water going to end up getting past Top Gun Maverick for the biggest movie of 2022 domestically?
Yeah.
Can it do 700 plus million? But I think 600 million is going to happen.
Yeah. So that would put it right overtop the Lion King of 2019 reboot,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
or reimagining live action Lion King,
Mm-hmm.
and right below Incredibles 2.
Yeah. I mean that feels right. And again, you gotta be an in the bag, and I hate to say use this term, it's beneath us, but you'd have to be a hater to say that Avatar: The Way of Water is not a giant success if it cracks the top 10 domestic earners of all time.
Mm-hmm.
All time.
Well, so that would leave it outside of the top 10, though,
Okay, okay. So
right?
then,
Because that it would then be at 13.
okay. I
But
mean,
I
I
mean, that's
think
the thing is to get to the top 10, it just has to beat out the Avengers at 623, which is a strong possibility.
I mean, right now that's 200 million away, and I do think Avatar: Way of Water has at least $200 million left in the tank domestically. I
Yeah,
mean,
and
this hold and this again, this third Monday was incredible and shows the staying power of this movie.
all of its competitors.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're looking at, I think Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. I'm big on that. I
Yep.
love this cume right now, 67. I think
Yep.
it's just going to continue to go up.
Yep.
People are gonna discover this movie and love this movie, but it's not gonna take away the audience from Avatar, right?
No. No.
A movie like Megan, which we're talking about in our preview episode
Hmm.
coming later this week, that's gonna be one of those movies that I think is gonna do really well,
Yep.
but it's gonna be a momentary diversion. It's like, let's
Yes.
go visit Megan. We'll
Yes.
go visit Megan, but we're gonna come home to Avatar.
Yes. 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 We'll go see Grandpa, but we're not living at Grandpa's house.
Now, who lives at Grandpa's house?
Right. 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 Grandpa barely lives there.
Yeah.
But yes, you live in Pandora, you live in Avatar for as long as this movie will let you. The same way people kept going back to Maverick
Mm-hmm.
and living in Maverick throughout the summer. No matter
Yeah.
what else came out, you'd have these blips, you'd have these movies that would do great. And then a couple of weeks later, they're behind Maverick in the top 10. And that's going to be the case with it. I mean, the January slate is so bare in terms
Yeah.
of big, big movies. Way of Water is really, even if things like Knock at the Cabin Door and Megan have big opening weekends or two, Avatar will end up being ahead of them.
Yeah. You go, you see who knocked,
Yep.
and then you come back. I mean, not
Yep.
living in the cabin.
Yeah. So I mean, I think Way of Water does have another 200 million in the tank to get to at least 625 domestic. I think that is going to happen. The Rogue One comparison to me, I think is out the window because at 533 million Rogue One did that. Way of Water is going to blow past that.
I believe that to be true. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Something to talk about with the upcoming legs of Way of Water is that, we all went back to work today.
Mm-hmm.
The office life came back today, Tuesday, January 3rd. Vacation's over. Open up the spreadsheets.
Yeah.
Or
Joe Lunchpail came back earlier than that.
Joe Lunchpail's been there the whole time. You're right. People have been sitting eating their sandwiches on a construction site the whole last 2 weeks. But a lot of people
sleep because you fall off that beam.
Of course. So you don't get a day off because, you could crack your skull open. But a lot of people were off and now they're back to work. But you still got college kids. They ain't doing nothing for another 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
People forget, if you're a college kid, that holiday season goes all the way through MLK Day. So they're basically still going to be going to movies Tuesdays and Wednesdays and Thursdays. And I think that's going to be huge for Avatar. Probably not as big for Puss in Boots, but I think Avatar is still going to have big weekday gains, not as big as during the holidays, but I think college kids are still going to be having nothing to do and going to see this movie.
Listen, Pat, if you're a college kid and you've been hanging around your parents' house for weeks,
Yep.
and the parents are exhausted because they got little ones too. They still got little ones.
Right.
They're going to say, hey, go take your little sister, go take your little brother to Puss in Boots.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Get
Okay.
out of our hair, get them out of our hair. Go
Right.
drive them, go take them to a movie. That's
Okay.
going to happen.
That'll happen. But I do think those college kids will say, yeah, I'll take them to see Puss in Boots. And then they take the kids to see Way of Water.
I mean, it's possible.
Or they drop their little brother off at a playground, tell them don't get kidnapped, and then they go and see Way of Water and they come back. And if the little brother's there, they take them home. And if they're not, they got a story to tell their parents.
Yeah, I mean, you're very much making it seem that the family dynamic is broken in America.
I think it
Kids aren't
is.
listening to their parents.
Right.
Kids don't care about their little siblings. I mean, what is this?
I think
This is
that
not
could,
the America that I want to live in.
that said, in the end, they're still going to the movies, and that's the
Mm-hmm.
most important thing to do. You know, sure, listening to your parents, sure, keeping your little brother from getting kidnapped is all positives, and we should get back to that. But in this scenario, the college kid is still buying a ticket to a big movie, so I think it's not totally broken.
Okay.
Americana could still move on as long as they go see that movie in the middle of the week. And I think, yeah, you've still got a lot of college kids who are going to be around to go see movies on a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And Avatar Way of Water is going to benefit from that. But I mean, a movie that has benefited from nothing. I want to jump to what was number 5 here. Babylon from Paramount Pictures. We talked a lot about this movie with Scott Mendelson last week on our record-breaking episode from last week. If you haven't checked that out, you got it now. It's biggest episode, the BO Boys, an all-timer, a Way of Water level episode for us. But we talked a lot about Babylon and how it completely tanked in its opening weekend. And I'm looking at these numbers for its second weekend. It did $2.6 million, only dropped 28%. So in theory, you would think, oh, that's a good hold, but it's a total of $10 million right now. I mean, this movie, it needed to have a giant turnaround in the second weekend. And from where I'm sitting, that didn't happen. What do you think about this Babylon second weekend?
Really, this is an inconsequential
Yep.
conversation because this movie is a blip.
Yep.
It made no money.
Yep.
It will win no awards.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, maybe a Globe, but what do those count for?
Right.
Tom Cruise, one of the biggest stars of all time, returned his.
Yes.
So
Yes.
the Golden Globe is beyond tarnished.
Yep.
The thing is that this movie was always going to be a hard sell, as we said before.
Mm-hmm.
It's doing what we thought it was going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the only thing to take from this is how does this affect Margot Robbie going forward? That's the big thing. Brad Pitt, I think, is untarnished by this.
Yeah.
I think, Chazelle is done when it comes to getting a huge paycheck. The guy's going to have to do a smaller movie.
Mm-hmm.
He's done smaller movies before. He can come back. We've seen this with people like, I'm not going to judge directors against each other, But we saw someone like M. Night who came back after big bombs.
Yes.
But M. Night was working in a thriller/horror space, which is always more profitable and lucrative than this sort of milieu.
Right. Chazelle works in a space of star-driven, big budget dramas. Can he go back to basics? For basics for him was still an indie drama.
Yeah.
But
like
he doesn't
Whiplash.
have that sort of rabbit to pull out of his hat and do a horror movie or do a low budget thriller.
Yes.
And will a studio give him $60+ million to do a star-driven movie again?
No,
I don't think
and
so.
They shouldn't. They shouldn't.
Right.
Right? You shouldn't give The Rock $200+ million to do a superhero movie, and you shouldn't give Damien Chazelle $60 million to do whatever Babylon was.
So one thing to note in the comparison between Babylon and Amsterdam, the two, star Margot Robbie plus lots of stars running around acting crazy, and you can't tell what the movie's about in the trailer.
Plus
And they both
auteur
bombed.
director.
And auteur director, two very similar movies. After its second weekend, Amsterdam was at 11.8 million. And after its second weekend, Babylon is at $10 million. So Amsterdam is somehow running ahead of Babylon.
Well, if the opposite happened, we'd see the same thing. I mean,
Okay.
the one that came first was gonna do better because
Okay.
people were gonna be like, "Oh, I'm curious about this," and then they hated it, and then they saw Babylon, and they're like, "I'm not doing Amsterdam again.
Right.
I'm not
That's
making
true.
the Amsterdam mistake." If it was the other way around, they would say, "I'm not making that Babylon mistake again."
Right. Yeah. If anything, because I mean, we saw both of these movies, and Amsterdam is pretty clearly the worst of the two films. I think it's
I
not even
couldn't
close.
complete it. I did not
Yeah.
finish that film.
So I do think if Amsterdam came out second, there would not be the level of predetermined hate for Amsterdam, because people wouldn't have hated Babylon as much as they hated Amsterdam, is my guess. But either way, it's interesting that these two movies are going to end up at almost the same box office number. It's almost as if these same exact people saw both of these movies.
Now, I think the movie we really have to talk about here that is doing so poorly
Okay.
is a movie that rebranded itself midstream, which is always horrible. And I'm talking about the number 4 movie, Whitney Houston, I Want to Dance with Somebody. Okay.
Yeah.
Whitney Houston obviously added on the front of this because I Want to Dance with Somebody was not an iconic enough name to explain to people who this movie was about.
Yeah.
And you didn't see this with Bohemian Rhapsody. It didn't become Freddie Mercury Bohemian Rhapsody or Queen Bohemian Rhapsody.
Right.
The fact that this movie is at $14.5 million in its second weekend over a holiday week. Like, this was a movie that if it was going to rebound, it would rebound now.
Yes.
Right? Babylon
yes.
was never going to rebound. But
Right.
this would be a movie that, we always talk about The Greatest Showman, and that's a unicorn. That is
Yep.
a unicorn, and we have to realize that that's a unicorn.
Mm-hmm.
But there could have been people who were like, I'm waiting to see this movie because I have other things to do. This would have been the prime time to see this film, and it dropped 16%.
Yeah.
With everything else that has been succeeding went up.
Yes.
Even The Menu, down at 8, went up 62%.
A movie that's been out for 2 months now.
Yeah. And now is available on HBO Max. So that is going to end effectively its run. But I will give you a little bit of time to crow about the success of this movie. $36.1 million for a movie at this scale and with this sort of theme. It did very well.
Yeah. I mean,
it's a success.
The Menu is about, it's so close. It's going to happen in the next week, it seems, is going to end up making more. And obviously this next movie is a spectacular all-time bomb, but The Menu is going to make more than Disney's Strange World, and that was almost unfathomable 2 months ago, and it's happening. They are within a couple of 100,000 of each other. Next weekend, even being on HBO Max, The Menu is going to pass Disney's Strange World, its big animated Thanksgiving release. This is huge for The Menu.
And Strange World, I said it was going to be a catastrophe. Strange World is, even if you add in inflation, is the biggest box office bomb in Disney animation history.
Wow.
Even adjusted for inflation.
Wow. That you got to let that sink in. That is stunning. Disney has been around since the 20s. We're talking about a company that started releasing movies back when steamboats were the preferred mode of transportation. And Strange World is the biggest bomb in the history of their animation studio.
Now, we don't normally talk about adjusted for inflation because, listen, we live in the US. Nothing ever is adjusted for inflation,
Nothing.
right? No
No.
business ever adjusts anything for inflation. So why should we start?
Right. Right.
But it's just such a huge deal.
It's such a huge deal. It's stunning. It's stunning how badly Strange World is bombed. But The Menu, a small thriller from Fox Searchlight, is about to surpass that. This is an incredible haul for The Menu. And we're not an awards podcast. There are other podcasts that handle that. But I do think The Menu is the type of movie where its box office run has been so solid and so surprising and it's been such an audience pleaser. And I do think, again, we're not the Streamo boys, but I think it's going to play like gangbusters now that it's on HBO. I think another huge audience is going to find this movie and talk about it online. I think The Menu is a movie that's done so well, it could generate some awards buzz because of that. And I'm talking like screenplay, maybe a Ray Fiennes Best Actor nom, possibly. I do think that is how well The Menu is performed with audiences and at the box office, that it could actually get a screenplay Oscar nomination out of its box office.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the sort of movie, just talking money-wise,
Yep.
that it's what we always say. This was a theatrical movie that did well, that is now going to drive people to HBO Max.
Yes.
Instead of just dropping it on HBO Max or dropping it on Hulu and letting it disappear, this movie's going to make more money for the people who made it because it went the right direction.
Yes.
It went from theaters to streaming. Now,
yes.
I did see it's on PVOD to buy for $15.
Mm-hmm.
So here's your option. You can either subscribe to HBO Max for a month or just own this movie, right? So you do have the option not to subscribe to HBO Max and still be able to buy this movie for the cost of a cheap ticket in New York City.
Right. But either way, it's generating revenue.
Money.
Yep.
And people are going to go on iTunes, and if they don't do the streaming thing, they go on iTunes, they see this movie, they see, oh, I saw that on the marquee, or I saw that in the newspaper, or whatever. $15. It's a night at home. We can spend $14, $15. They'll buy it, right? But they knew it was in the theater. If it's a random movie that just got dropped on iTunes, they're not going to buy it.
Right. So The Menu continues to be successful. But back to Whitney Houston, I Want to Dance with Somebody. I mean,
it's a total failure. And listen, R.I.P. Okay?
Of course.
And listen, email us if you disagree with this. But I hate to say it, but Mariah Carey has usurped Whitney Houston's place in our culture. Okay? Because she's the diva that survived. She's the diva that has the Christmas specials. And Whitney Houston is the person who died in a really tragic way. And she's a bummer to think about, right? I know she glowed brighter than any star ever did in the 80s. Listen, we all loved Whitney Houston in the 80s.
Yes.
Gorgeous, talented, fierce. She was a movie star, for Christ's sake. The Bodyguard. Waiting to Exhale.
Yep.
The Preacher's Wife to a smaller extent. But she was just a glowing star. And now it's been dimmed and diminished that this movie about this once upon a time icon has made so little.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's also a situation where they, and usually these movies, you do try and cast a up and comer in the role, but they didn't have a movie star or particularly even like very well known up and coming actress in the lead. So there was no draw there. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I don't think the movie was particularly well reviewed.
No.
And these type of movies, I mean, even though Bohemian Rhapsody wasn't that well reviewed, it was just a playlist of songs that people wanted to listen to for 3 hours. And Rami Malek ended up winning the Oscar for it. So there was something there, that was a big draw to people. and something like Rocket Man was pretty well reviewed, and Elton John doesn't have the tragic ending that Whitney Houston has. Um,
Well,
yeah,
just to talk
I
a
mean,
little bit
Elvis
about,
has a tragic ending though, but I
but
think
you know, we're
that,
so far out from it,
yeah,
and there's been so many jokes made about him
yep,
and his death that it no longer impacts people the way that I think a pretty recent
yeah,
death,
yeah,
the way she died, I think is really really a bummer. And I haven't seen the
yes,
film, so I don't know how they tackle it, but it's like, do you want to see that on Christmas?
right, right. There is something to Elvis's death that even though he died tragically, like you said, a long time ago. And there's a huge contingent of people who also just don't believe he did die.
Mhm.
Whereas with Whitney Houston, we all accept that she did die. And with
Yes.
Elvis, you could go see that movie and you could say, it doesn't matter what they show me at the end. I know Elvis is still alive. And you
Exactly. Yeah.
can't do
Yeah.
that with Whitney Houston. I want to dance with somebody.
And so we're just to look at like a comparison here.
Sure.
Respect, which was a
Hmm.
movie that came out in 2021 in a very different time,
Hmm.
obviously. That was like a COVID-ish time. It still made $24.2 million at the box office.
Hmm.
Okay. Now,
Hmm.
Aretha Franklin, icon, huge, classic artist behind many classic songs.
Hmm.
And I think the key ingredient here is Jennifer Hudson is a
Yep.
name. She's
Yep.
a person who people know. She won an Oscar. She's been in big movies. And that is what put that movie wasn't a success.
No,
But 24 million ain't 10 million or whatever this movie's
it's
at,
at 15, but I
or
will say
15.
I do think that if the Jennifer Hudson starring Respect, if the Aretha Franklin movie came out now instead of the Whitney Houston movie, I do think it would have done a lot better.
Yes.
Because Respect came out what, August of 2021, so it was still very much like feeling out of the pandemic box office times.
Yeah, August 13th.
Yeah, I think if that movie came out instead of the Whitney Houston movie now, it would have been doing a lot better. Because, like you said, Jennifer Hudson is a star. She's an Oscar winner. She's a very famous person.
She's a famous person, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
And in that part,
yes,
fuck it, it's a raw feed. In that part, she's a star, right?
yes,
As a
yes,
singer, she's a star. She won as a singer for Dreamgirls.
yes, yes. So I think if you switch those movies out, the Aretha Franklin movie would be doing better right now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that at this point, I Want to Dance with Somebody is totally DOA. It made 1 point. What did it make last weekend? It made 3.9 million in its last holiday weekend. It's going to
Yeah,
fall off the face of the earth this coming weekend. I think
yeah,
it's totally done.
yeah. Because I mean, I think the audience who would go see that has had their chance and said no.
Yeah, yeah. And you know what? Like you said at the top when you brought up this movie, changing the title last minute and adding the character's name to the front just does not work. I mean,
What
we
does
saw
that
that.
remind you of?
I mean, Harley Quinn, Birds of Prey.
Yep.
It doesn't help. It doesn't help. You got to call it. If that's what you wanted to call it, you had to call it that months in advance. This movie needed to be called Whitney Houston the movie. Birds
Yep.
of Prey needed to be called Harley Quinn the movie, but 3 months in advance, not right before as the film is being delivered to the theater.
Retitling a movie
Mm-hmm.
in the middle of its run is like having a commercial where you get actors to pretend they saw the movie and say how much they like it.
Uh-huh.
When those commercials come out in the middle of a movie's run or in the second weekend of a movie's run, you know
Yes.
that there's trouble.
Yes.
And
Yes. It
listen,
is a warning sign.
I haven't watched a lot of TV. Maybe there's a Whitney Houston I just want to dance with somebody commercial where they have actors saying that they just saw that movie. That's very well a possibility
Right.
on
Right.
stations that I don't watch,
Right. Right.
cuz I don't watch terrestrial TV a lot.
No, no, you don't. Your rabbit ears antennas, they've totally gone to hell. They're totally
Mhm.
busted. So yeah, that movie is DOA. I mean, just looking through, I think the movie we got to end on these last few minutes that we really haven't talked about much is Puss in Boots, The Last Wish.
Yes.
You know, it made 16.8 million in its second weekend, which is plus 35% compared to the first weekend. It is now at $67 million total after a $5 million Monday. So, I mean, this movie is so poised to just own the rats for the next couple of months. You know, the rats need their cheese, and this is the only cheese they're getting until the Mario Brothers movie in the spring. Is that possible? I mean, that's
Anything of consequence. Like we may be
yes.
missing something, but like a big movie,
Yeah.
probably not till Mario, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So the last Puss in Boots, The Last Wish is just gonna run the table as the only for kids only movie in the theaters. It's at 67 million now. I think we're looking at $100 million domestic grosser when all said and done. I
I
think it's
think
going
so
to happen.
too. I absolutely believe so too. And I think this is a movie that's well reviewed, which,
Yep.
listen, for kids, that doesn't matter. But
Mm-hmm.
what you can have is parents and adults seeing this movie, right?
Yep.
Sans kids, without their kids. There could be people that are adult aged who grew up on Shrek and they've heard that The Last Wish is really good. And they're going to
Yep.
be like, you know what? F it.
Yep.
Let me relive my childhood for a brief hour and a half or whatever this movie is, and they're gonna pay and put down a ticket, put down money for a ticket to Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. So I
Yeah.
think you're gonna have adults seeing this movie without kids.
I think we're looking at scenarios in which there are single people in their late 30s and early 40s, whether have always been single. I would say a lot of divorcees,
Possibly.
and they're going on a first or second date with someone that they met on a dating app, and they're going to go see Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. Because to that 38-year-old divorcee, they loved Shrek in 2001 when they were like in college or they were teenagers. And the person they just met on the dating app also has a fondness for Shrek from when they were younger. And Puss in Boots: Last Wish is doing great on Rotten Tomatoes, well reviewed. And that will be a first date for these either longtime singles or divorcees in their late 30s. That is
Mm-hmm.
happening for sure.
Yeah, and
And
listen,
good on them.
good,
I hope they love it and they hook up afterwards.
everybody deserves love.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, Puss in Boots. I mean, this is not a movie that I think I will see
Mm-hmm.
personally,
Mm-hmm.
but I do think people my age will see it.
Yes. 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 And I think, listen, you're out there on the scene, you know, not to blow up your spot, but there may be a situation in which a woman of our age does say to you, "Hey, I'm looking forward to hanging out, and I think we should go see Puss in Boots: The Last Wish because I love Shrek as a kid. I love Puss in Boots as a kid or a teenager."
Yeah,
I think that's something for you to prepare yourself for.
I mean, anything's possible.
Yeah, yeah, but yeah. I mean, this movie is well reviewed. It picked up big time in its second weekend. It's got Antonio Banderas, who is just as famous as someone gets. You know, he's been a star forever. And it's IP. It's the Shrekiverse. This
Mm-hmm.
movie is going to continue doing well. It's going to get to 100 domestic.
Yeah, yep, gonna beat bad guys.
It's going to beat the bad guys for sure. And it's going to triple Strange Days when all is said and done.
Strange World.
Strange World, of course. Strange
Well, let's
Days
look up
is good.
Strange Days. Let's see if Strange Days made more than Strange World.
So that's the Catherine Bigelow sci-fi movie
Yes.
in the 90s that I can't imagine did well.
It,
I'm sure it's a well-liked movie. It's a cult movie, but
Uh,
I can't imagine it did all that well at the box office. So are you looking at it?
oh, I'm
1995
looking at
Strange Days?
October 6th, 1995. It made 7.9 domestic. So, hey, Strange World, you're better than Strange Days.
Okay. Good on you, Strange. So Strange World, the holiday major animated release from Disney, it made more than the mid 90s sci-fi bomb Strange Days.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So there's a, you know what? Small victories.
Yep. Sometimes that's all you need to move forward.
Yep.
But I will caution, don't move forward with anything related to Strange World.
No, no, no. That is, it is not, unlike Shrek, that is not IP. We do not expect to see spin-offs from the Strange Worldiverse.
No.
So Clayton, is there anything else that you wanted to go over here? Wakanda Forever up 47%. It's at 438 million. I mean, the movie's a mega hit.
Yeah,
Good
and
on
a
Wakanda
rebound
Forever.
for it. It's back in the top 5 or higher up in the top 5 than it's been.
Yeah,
So good for it. Listen, that's a movie that is a strong success.
yeah. It added 60 theaters, and with the amount of releases coming the next weeks, Wakanda Forever is probably going to continue to keep a good amount of theaters. It'll probably remain a top 5 movie for another couple of weeks. It's going to be there.
Yeah, and with people's attention spans the way they are, it's been out long enough that people will be like, "Well, I saw it the first weekend, but I kind of forget what happens. Maybe I'll
Right.
refresh my memory."
Right, right. I mean, maybe Marvel just throws in another cameo or end credit sequence, and it could, it could have a huge resurgence. We'll see.
Yeah.
But it's doing great. And just one more, I'll just say one more good on ya for David Harbour, Violent Night. The movie is now up to $47 million. It's up to $48 million domestic. Has a shot of maybe squeaking into 40 million. And for a
You
movie
mean
like
50
that,
million?
I'm sorry, 50 million to
I
getting
don't
to,
think it has a shot. Christmas is over.
you think it's done?
Yeah,
It's
I
going to
think it's
top out at
done.
48 million.
Yeah, I think you put this thing on streaming ASAP.
Well, it's already on streaming because it's already been on PVOD.
Yeah, but no one's paying for this at that point. I mean, I think this is definitely a time where it's like, hey,
Drop it on Peacock.
yeah, I think they should have dropped it on Peacock Christmas Day.
No, because I think that movie probably did Bafa Streamo on
But no
PVOD
one
on
has
Christmas.
Peacock. It
Well, that's what I'm
wouldn't have
saying.
mattered as much.
I think a lot of people paid for it on Christmas Day. We
Yeah.
we paid for it. We watched this movie on Streamo
That's
at
true.
a
That's
party.
true.
So I
Yeah,
think
that's true.
Violent Night probably racked up. But listen, for this movie to even sniff 50 million domestic, huge success. David Harbour, the birth of a B movie star before our eyes. So I think we've done it, Clayton.
We did it, Pat.
So email us, of course, at theboboyspodcast at gmail.com. We love reading your emails. We'll get to some of the emails we've gotten already over the weekend and more emails that you send us on our preview episode at the end of the week. So send us those emails, theboboyspodcast at gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter, on social media at theboboyspod. Wannabe intern Christopher just killing it with the clips, with the videos. And we're going to have a very special brought to you by Wannabe intern Christopher episode of this show coming up very soon in the month of January. So get excited for that and follow us on social at the BO Boys Pod.
Yeah, and also rate, review, and follow us.
Yes.
On Apple Podcasts. We're going to read some reviews also on our preview episode.
Yes.
You guys have been stepping up huge with the reviews. Those are great for getting more people to discover us.
Yes. So we will do that on the next episode. So if you've recently written a review on Apple Podcasts, we will read that and, get your 5-star reviews in right now. And that is a great way of getting your message out to the world because we'll read it.
We ain't reading anything under 5.
No, 5-star.
If you think you're gonna go there and get a 3-star review read on air, you're a crazy person.
Ain't happening.
Nope.
Ain't happening. All right, Clayton. I think we've done it.
We definitely did it. I don't think there's anything left to say,
No.
except until next time. We'll
Will
smell
smell
you.
you.